March 6, 1943, 14 o'clock hours. The scorched, windswept plains of Tunisia, North Africa. The air is a thick, choking veil of yellow dust and the eye-stinging stench of diesel. You can feel the heat vibrating off the hull of a broken M3 Lee tank, its metal skin popping as it cools in the shadows of the Atlas Mountains. For the American Gs of the 2nd Corps, this isn't just a desert. It's a graveyard of ambition. Only weeks ago, at Kasserine Pass, the legendary Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox, had toyed with them. He had danced his panzers through their lines like a predator in a sheep pen, leaving behind a trail of charred wreckage and shattered morale. But on this afternoon, the dust cloud rising from the horizon isn't a German column. It's a lone, open-top command car, and the man standing inside it looks less like a general and more like a vengeful god of war. Major General George S. Patton Jr. stares through the grit, his ivory-handled revolvers catching the harsh African sun. He doesn't see a defeated army. He sees a blunt instrument that simply hasn't been sharpened yet. While his predecessors were terrified of Rommel's blitzkrieg, Patton is obsessed with it. In his footlocker, tucked away like a dark secret, lies a well-thumbed copy of Infantry, Grief and Infantry Attacks written by Rommel himself. Patton hasn't just read it, he has lived it. He has highlighted the margins, memorized the cadences of Rommel's aggression, and spotted the one thing the Desert Fox never expected: a student who could out-hustle the teacher. The atmosphere in the American camp shifts instantly. It's no longer about survival, it's about a transformation. Patton doesn't start with grand strategy. He starts with the soul. He finds soldiers for not wearing neckties in the middle of a desert. He screams at officers for being 5 minutes late. To the tired GI, it seems like madness. To Patton, it is the essential hardening of the blade. He knows that to beat Rommel's speed, his men must move with the mindless precision of a machine. "You're going to be the finest soldiers the world has ever seen," Patton growls, his voice a gravelly rasp that carries over the desert wind. "Because you're going to kill those Heine bastards before they even realize you've arrived." Across the hills, Rommel is confident. He views the Americans as amateurs, brave, perhaps, but clumsy and slow. He has spent years perfecting the art of the Schwerpunkt, the concentrated point of attack, and the Aufklärung, the aggressive reconnaissance that keeps the enemy off balance. He believes he owns the rhythm of this war. He believes the Americans are reactive, waiting for him to make the first move. He is wrong. While Rommel prepares his next masterful withdrawal and counterstrike, Patton is in his tent, lit by a single kerosene lamp. He is tracing maps not with the caution of a defender, but with the predatory hunger of a man who has found his mirror image. He sees how Rommel uses his 10th and 21st Panzer Divisions. He sees the gaps. He sees that Rommel's genius relies on the enemy being paralyzed by fear. But Patton isn't afraid. He's impatient. By late March, the Americans are no longer the soft boys Rommel outran at Kasserine. At the Battle of El Getter, the Desert Fox sends his 10th Panzer Division screaming toward the American lines, expecting them to fold. Instead, he hits a wall of fire and steel directed with a terrifying rhythmic intensity. Patton's artillery coordinated with a speed the Germans thought impossible rains hell on the panzers before they can even deploy. As the German tanks stall in the wadis, smoke billowing from their turrets, Patton stands on a ridge, binoculars pressed to his eyes. He isn't just winning a battle. He is proving a point. He is using Rommel's own principles of combined arms and violent forward momentum, but he is doing it with the industrial might and fresh fury of America. He looks at the carnage and whispers a line that would become legend. "Rommel, you magnificent bastard, I read your book." But the victory in Africa is just the beginning. The real shock for Rommel won't come in the sand. It will come in the hedgerows and open plains of Europe, where the Desert Fox will realize that Patton didn't just copy his strategy, he evolved it into something far more lethal. The fox was about to become the hunted, and he wouldn't even see the blow coming until the tanks were already in his rear. July 25, 1944, 9:30 hours, near Saint-Lô, Normandy. The landscape of France is a claustrophobic nightmare. For 7 weeks since D-Day, the Allied advance has been measured in yards, not miles. This is the bocage, a labyrinth of ancient earthen hedgerows topped with tangled trees and thick brush. Every field is a natural fortress. Every sunken lane is a kill zone. To the German defenders, this is a slow, grinding war of attrition that plays to their strengths. Even with Rommel recovering from a strafing attack that fractured his skull just days earlier, his spirit looms over the German defense. His Atlantic Wall might have been breached, but his doctrine of the flexible defense is holding the Allies in a chokehold. Then the earth begins to shake. Over 3,000 Allied aircraft scream overhead, dropping a carpet of high explosives that turns the German front lines into a moonscape. This is the beginning of Operation Cobra, but the real earthquake isn't the bombs, it's the man waiting in the wings to exploit the hole they've ripped in the earth. On August 1st, the U.S. Third Army is officially activated. At its head is George S. Patton, and he is about to unleash a brand of warfare that makes the German Blitzkrieg look like a slow-motion rehearsal. Image: map showing the Third Army breaking out of the Cotentin Peninsula and swinging into the open plains of Brittany and towards the Seine. You can hear the roar before you see them. Hundreds of M4 Sherman tanks, their engines governed at high speeds, their tracks clattering against the paved roads of France. Patton hasn't just studied Rommel's tactics. He has digitized them for the industrial age. While Rommel often struggled with the logistical nightmare of keeping his panzers fueled in the desert, Patton has turned logistics into a weapon. "We shall attack and attack until we are exhausted," Patton tells his commanders, "and then we shall attack again." In the German High Command, the reports coming in are dismissed as impossible. They believe no army can move this fast. They expect the Americans to stop and consolidate their flanks, just as traditional military doctrine dictates. They expect the Americans to be cautious of the shoulders of the breakthrough. But Patton is doing the unthinkable. He is ignoring his flanks. He is bypassing German strongpoints, leaving them to be cleaned up by the infantry, while his armored spearheads, the Vold Ironsides and the Patton's Ghosts, race deep into the enemy as rear. This is Rommel's Begegungskrieg war of movement pushed to its absolute breaking point. The German officers at the Obe, West, Supreme Command West, are paralyzed. They look at their maps and see Patton's columns moving 20, 30, even 50 miles in a single day. This isn't a breakthrough. It's a hemorrhage. Rommel, even from his hospital bed, would have recognized the pattern. It was the same daring move he used to cross the Meuse in 1940, but Patton has added a terrifying new variable: air-ground coordination. Above every tank column, Patton has a cab rank of P-47 Thunderbolt fighter bombers. Through a revolutionary radio link, tank commanders can talk directly to the pilots in the clouds. If a German Tiger tank or an 88mm flat gun blocks the road, the Shermans don't wait for artillery. They call down the jug. Within minutes, 500-pound bombs and rockets erase the obstacle. It is a symphony of violence that Rommel had dreamed of, but never had the resources to fully realize. By mid-August, the German 7th Army is being funneled into a pocket near Falaise. The trap is closing, and the panic among the veteran German troops is palpable. They call Patton's men the terror of the Third. Soldiers who had fought in Russia, who thought they knew the limits of human endurance and mechanical speed, find themselves being overtaken by American columns while they are still in retreat. You can see the wreckage of the German retreat littering the roadsides, not because they were outfought in a stand-up battle, but because they were outrun. Horses, carts, and half-tracks lie twisted in the ditches, abandoned because Patton's speed didn't give them time to refuel or regroup. As the sun sets over the smoking ruins of the Falaise Pocket, the scale of the disaster becomes clear to the German generals. They realize they aren't facing the amateurs of North Africa anymore. They are facing a force that has taken the German concept of the greatest speed and combined it with an endless supply of steel and fuel. But as Patton stands on the banks of the Seine, looking toward the heart of the Reich, he isn't satisfied. He knows that speed has a price. He knows that the further he runs, the thinner his lifeline becomes. And in the distance, the German army is beginning to do something they haven't done in years. They are stopping their retreat, they are digging in, and they are waiting for Patton to outrun his own shadow. September 1st, 1944, 18 o'clock hours. A muddy roadside near Verdun, France. The silence is the first thing you notice. For weeks, the air has been a continuous roar of radial engines and the rhythmic clack-clack-clack of tracks on pavement. But now, as a drizzling autumn rain begins to turn the French topsoil into a gray slurry, the Third Army has gone quiet. General Patton stands beside his command jeep, his gloved hand resting on the fender. He isn't looking at a map. He's looking at a row of M4 Shermans parked along the road, their crews sitting on the hulls, smoking in silence. Their fuel gauges are on empty. This is the logistical wall. Patton's speed, the very thing he used to shatter the German lines, has finally betrayed him. His supply lines now stretch over 400 miles back to the artificial harbors of Normandy. Behind him, the Red Ball Express, a massive convoy of thousands of trucks driven mostly by African-American soldiers, is working 24-hour shifts to bridge the gap. They are driving blackout style through the night, but it isn't enough. Patton's tanks are drinking 400,000 gallons of gasoline a day, and the tap has just run dry. "My men can eat their belts," Patton famously roars at a supply officer, "but my tanks gotta have gas." Across the lines, the German High Command, led by the brilliant and ruthless Field Marshal Walter Model, senses the hesitation. They recognize this moment. It is the same moment Rommel faced at El Alamein in 1942, the point where the spearhead outruns the shaft. The Germans call it Stärken der Abwehr, the stiffening of the image. Archival footage of empty jerry cans piled high and Allied soldiers resting by stalled tanks. While Patton fumes, the Germans are frantically rebuilding. They are no longer a shattered mob. They are retreat-hardened veterans falling back onto the Siegfried Line and the ancient fortress city of Metz. This is a city that hasn't been taken by force in nearly 1,500 years. Its forts are subterranean monsters of reinforced concrete and steel. Hidden under grassy mounds, their guns sighted to cover every inch of the Moselle River. Patton knows that if he stops, the German army will heal. He knows that Rommel's greatest successes came when he never gave the enemy a chance to breathe. But for the first time, Patton is forced into the one type of warfare he loathes: a frontal assault against a fortified position. The battle for Metz becomes a grueling, bloody nightmare. The American Ghost divisions are now bogged down in the mud of Lorraine. The speed is gone. The precision is replaced by the blunt trauma of artillery duels and house-to-house fighting. You can feel the frustration radiating from Patton's headquarters. He is watching his casualties climb while his momentum, the psychological edge he held over the Germans, evaporates. But it's here, in the dark woods of the Ardennes to the north, that a different kind of storm is brewing. Adolf Hitler, obsessed with the idea of a second blitzkrieg, is looking at Patton's stalled army. He sees the fuel crisis. He sees the overextended lines. He decides that now is the time to strike a blow that will throw the Allies back into the sea. He plans to launch a massive armored counteroffensive through the impenetrable Ardennes forest, aimed at the port of Antwerp. The Germans are counting on one thing: that the Allied leadership is too slow, too bureaucratic, and too divided to react to a surprise attack. They believe Patton is pinned down in the mud of Metz, neutralized by his own success. They have forgotten Patton's most dangerous trait: It wasn't just his ability to study Rommel's speed, it was his ability to pivot his entire army on a dime, a maneuver that should be physically impossible for 200,000 men. As the first German Tiger tanks roar out of the morning mist on December 16th, starting the Battle of the Bulge, the Allied High Command is in a state of total shock. The front is collapsing. The 101st Airborne is surrounded at Bastogne. The situation is catastrophic. In a heated briefing room in Verdun, General Eisenhower looks at his maps in despair. He turns to Patton and asks the impossible. "George, can you move 3 divisions to the Ardennes?" "How soon?" Patton doesn't hesitate. He doesn't ask for a week. He doesn't ask for more fuel. He looks at his watch. "As soon as you're through with me," Patton says, his voice ice cold, "I can attack with 3 divisions in 48 hours. The room goes silent. The other generals think he's grandstanding. They think it's a suicide mission. But Patton has already been secretly preparing for this exact nightmare. He is about to perform the greatest logistical and tactical pivot in the history of mechanized warfare. December 18, 1944, 4 o'clock hours. A frozen command trailer near the Meuse River. The temperature has plummeted to 10 degrees below zero. Outside, the world is a monochromatic blur of swirling snow and jagged pine trees. Inside the trailer, the air is thick with the smell of stale coffee and the frantic scratching of grease pencils on acetate map overlays. General Patton isn't sleeping. He is doing something that defies every law of military physics. To the German High Command, an army is like a great ocean liner. It takes miles and hours to turn. They are currently watching Patton's Third Army heavily engaged in the south, facing east toward the Rhine. They are certain he is stuck. But at this very moment, Patton is shouting orders into a field telephone that will change the course of the war. "I don't care about the weather," he barks. "I don't care about the sleep. Get those tanks moving north." In a feat of staff work that remains a gold standard in military academies today, Patton's team has worked through the night. They have coordinated the movement of 250,000 men and 133,000 vehicles. This isn't just a retreat or an advance. It is a 90-degree pivot in the middle of a blizzard, on icy, 2-lane roads, while under constant threat of German sabotage. This was Rommel's dream. The Desert Fox had always preached the indirect approach, the ability to strike where the enemy least expects it. But Rommel usually did this with a single division of 15,000 men in the flat, open desert. Patton is doing it with an entire field army in the mountainous, choked forests of the Ardennes. The German soldiers of the 5th Panzer Army, spearheaded by the elite Leibstandarte SS, are closing in on the vital crossroads of Bastogne. They can see the town's spire through their binocular sights. They know the American 101st Airborne is surrounded, out of food, and nearly out of ammunition. The Germans believe they have won. They believe the Amis are paralyzed by the cold. They haven't accounted for the Patton speed. You can feel the ground shudder as the 4th Armored Division leads the charge. They aren't just driving, they are racing. Tank commanders stand tall in their hatches, faces encrusted with ice, eyes fixed on the horizon. They are bypassing burning fuel dumps and ignoring the German werewolf, commandos dressed in American uniforms trying to misdirect traffic. On December 26th, just 3 days after Patton's impossible promise to Eisenhower, the lead tanks of the 4th Armored see the perimeter of Bastogne. The German defenders are stunned. They look to their flank and see a wall of American steel that wasn't supposed to exist for another week. This is the moment where Rommel's ghost would have recognized a superior hand. Patton hadn't just used Rommel's speed. He had used American industrial logistics to turn that speed into a relentless, crushing weight. They came out of the snow like demons, one captured German officer would later recount. "We thought they were still 100 miles away. Nobody moves an army that fast in the winter. Nobody?" Patton's relief of Bastogne breaks the back of Hitler's final gamble. The bulge begins to deflate. But as the German retreat turns into a rout, Patton realizes the war is no longer about just winning, it's about the finish line. He looks toward the Rhine, the last great barrier protecting the heart of Nazi Germany. He knows that Rommel had once said the first few hours of an invasion are the most critical. Patton is determined to make the crossing of the Rhine so fast, so violent, and so unexpected that the German soul finally snaps. But there is one final surprise waiting for him on the other side. A realization that even his hero, Rommel, couldn't have foreseen March 22, 1945, 22 o'clock hours. The banks of the Rhine River near Oppenheim. The Rhine isn't just a river. It's a psychological barrier that has guarded the heart of Germany for 2,000 years. To the German soldiers shivering in their foxholes on the eastern bank, the water is their final, insurmountable wall. They have been told by their commanders that an Allied crossing will require weeks of preparation, massive artillery barrages, and a slow, methodical buildup. They are expecting Field Marshal Montgomery, the cautious, deliberate British commander to the north, to make the first move. They aren't looking at the dark, silent waters near Oppenheim. Suddenly, the silence is broken by the soft splash of oars and the low hum of assault boat engines. There is no preparatory bombardment, no screaming sirens. General Patton has ordered a silent crossing. He isn't waiting for the grand stage. He is stealing the show in the middle of the night. Image: night vision-style recreation of U.S. troops crossing the Rhine in small boats under a moonless sky. By the time the German sentries realize what's happening, the first wave of the 5th Infantry Division is already scrambling up the muddy eastern bank. By dawn, Patton has a bridgehead. By noon, he has a bridge. By the next morning, he is telephoning Allied headquarters with a smirk in his voice that could be felt through the wires. "I'm across," he tells them, "and I did it without a 1,000-plane raid or a week of shelling." This was the ultimate evolution of the Rommel strategy. The Desert Fox had always championed the element of surprise striking when the enemy's guard was down and his eyes were elsewhere, but Patton had added a layer of American audacity. While Rommel often had to scrap and scrounge for every tank and gallon of fuel, Patton had turned the entire U.S. industrial machine into a speed factory. As the Third Army pours across the Rhine, the German defense doesn't just bend, it shatters. Patton unleashes his armor into the heart of the Reich. This is no longer a battle. It's a race. The German soldiers, many of whom had fought in the glory days of 1940, are bewildered. They see American columns bypassing their towns, ignore their surrenders, and racing toward the next objective before the dust from the previous one has even settled. You can see it in the eyes of the captured German generals. They had spent years studying the art of war and Rommel's tactical brilliance. But in Patton, they see something more terrifying. A man who has perfected their own game and then doubled the stakes. Rommel had used speed to win battles. Patton was using speed to end a civilization's will to fight. The Germans are a defeated people, Patton writes in his diary, his tone devoid of the earlier bravado. He sees the columns of refugees, the white flags hanging from every window, and the hollowed-out remains of the once mighty Wehrmacht. He has out-blitzed the Blitzkrieg. In those final weeks of the war, Patton's Third Army captures more territory, more prisoners, and moves faster than any other force in history. He had taken the Desert Fox's manual and used it to write the final chapter of the Nazi regime. The tragedy, of course, is that Rommel never lived to see his student complete the course. Forced to commit suicide by Hitler in late 1944, the Fox died before the Rhine was ever breached. But if he had been standing on those hills in March 1945, watching the endless columns of American steel surging toward the Danube, he would have recognized the ghost of his own genius. He would have seen that while he was the one who taught the world how to move, it was George S. Patton who showed the world how to never stop. Patton didn't just read the book. He mastered the spirit behind the words, the belief that in war, audacity is the only true currency. And on the smoking ruins of the Third Reich, he proved that when you combine a teacher's brilliance with a student's relentless fury, the result isn't just victory. It's a legend that would echo through history forever.